Hi there, thank you for return to my channel. How good your day? Whatever your mood, please take a few minutes to join me. I hope today's story will help you relax, unwind, and find some peace after a long day. Now, let's begin.
The group chat had been quiet for most of the year. I should have taken that as peace. But no, early November, and there it was again. A photo of last year's turkey, followed by a message from my mother. Thanksgiving is around the corner. Merwin, your usual magic in the kitchen, please. No question mark. No, would you be up for it this year? Just an expectation baked into tradition, like it was my job. Before I could even finish the message, Adrian chimed in, sending a link to some gourmet cornbread stuffing recipe with his usual note. Would love this on the table. I doubt he's ever peeled garlic. I read their words twice. Not a single acknowledgement that I might have plans, or a life, or fatigue. That's the thing about being reliable. People stop treating it like a virtue and start treating it like furniture. I closed the chat and stared at my coffee, warm, bitter, a little burnt, fitting. Sometimes, I thought, the quietest roles are the heaviest, and that silence was starting to feel heavy in all the wrong ways. A few days passed, and I nearly forgot about it until the box arrived at my door. Neatly wrapped in deep brown paper, tied with gold ribbon. I recognized my sister's handwriting right away. Happy birthday! Open me! Inside, a copper pan set that looked like it belonged in a Food Network studio. High-end, heavy, expensive. The card read, "Because no one sautés like you do. Love, the family." I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't a gift. It was a baton. The kitchen torch passed down again without my consent. I didn't feel celebrated. I felt summoned. They didn't buy me this to honor me, I thought. They bought it to lock me back in the kitchen. A quote from a podcast slipped back into my mind. Sometimes love is disguised as leverage. I sat down on the floor, the open box beside me. My fingers brushed over the polished handle of one of the pans. It gleamed in the late afternoon sun, like it knew what it was, a pretty shackle, and I hadn't even replied to the group chat yet. Packing takes less time when you already know the layout of the house. The aprons are always folded in the same drawer. The prep knives still sit in the same magnetic strip. I could walk through that kitchen blindfolded. I loaded the car with half my closet, tucked the copper set in the back seat, and left Boston around 8 a.m. The drive to Cape Elizabeth takes a little over 2 hours, just enough time to reflect, but not enough to talk yourself out of anything. The closer I got, the more my stomach knotted. I wasn't sure if it was dread or conditioning. Years of this. One Thanksgiving, Adrian had shown up late with a bottle of wine he probably hadn't even bought himself. Mom greeted him like a soldier returning from war. "You made it." "Look at you." Meanwhile, I'd been in the kitchen since sunrise. The stuffing was ready, the pies cooling. My apron still smelled like gravy. He raised a glass. I washed his wine glasses later. The memory made my hands tighten around the wheel. Why was I doing this again? Was I really driving back into the same pattern, expecting a different result? Or was I just not brave enough to stop playing the part? The thought lingered as I passed the Welcome to Cape Elizabeth sign. Same weathered wood, same disappointment. That night, I sat in my apartment, suitcase still unopened on the bed. I scrolled back through the group chat, but didn't reply. Instead, I messaged Carter. "I don't think I want to go." The 3 dots popped up almost immediately. "Then don't. Stop folding napkins for people who wouldn't notice if you weren't at the table." I laughed. Bitterly. Not because it was funny, but because it was true. The copper pans still sat in their box. I hadn't even peeled off the barcode sticker. I walked over, stared at them, then slowly closed the lid again. They'd look better unopened anyway. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but something had cracked. And once you see the crack, it doesn't matter how polished the surface is, you can't unsee it. I sank into the couch, suitcase to my left, pan set to my right, both waiting. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure who would move first, me or them. The cocktail hour was already in full swing when I stepped through the back entrance. I hadn't told anyone I was coming early, but of course no one was surprised either. That's how it worked in this family. My arrival wasn't about presents, it was about utility. Adrian's house had the usual shine, a beach view, warm lighting, curated imperfections. The kind of place you walk into and feel like you're already on a brochure. Inside, people hovered over cheese platters and wine glasses. Laughter, light jazz, coordinated, not casual. I scanned the room for my seat, found it by the patio door, the same spot I'd been put in the last 4 years, the kind of placement that makes it easy to help with trays. Eleanor passed by with her wine and said without stopping, "Don't forget to refresh the cranberry garnish, sweetheart." Sweetheart. Not hi, not glad you're here. The garnish. I nodded. It wasn't rage, not yet. But something settled, deep, familiar, and cold. Later in the evening, just after the second round of drinks, Adrian stood and tapped his glass. "Let's all give thanks to our in-house holiday chef, Merwin. We'd starve without him." The room burst into applause. Olivia, his newest accessory, leaned in and added, "Do you take bookings? I've got a few events coming up." I forced a laugh, a dry one. No one seemed to notice that it didn't reach my eyes. Or maybe they did, and liked it that way. Uncle Drew chimed in. "Seriously, Mayor, when are you opening that restaurant?" I said nothing. Because what do you say when the role you've been pushed into becomes your personality? They weren't mocking me out of cruelty. No, it was worse. They thought they were honoring me, praising me for a job I never applied for. That's the kind of mockery you can't protest without sounding ungrateful. The word chef stuck to me like grease I couldn't scrub off. I was their seasonal mascot. Turkey man, sauté servant, roast whisperer. Whatever they needed, I became. Not once had someone asked if I wanted to be any of those things. That night, after slipping out early with a vague excuse about early prep tomorrow, I sat on the edge of the guest bed in silence. The email pinged at 9:03 p.m. Subject, Adrian's holiday menu, finalized. I opened the PDF. Roasted butternut squash soup, caramelized onion stuffing, rosemary garlic turkey, chocolate bourbon, pecan pie. I read the list slowly. Every single dish, mine. Adrian had slapped his name across my work like a greasy signature on a forged canvas. At the bottom, he'd added, suggested wine pairings, like a cherry on a stolen cake. Eleanor's message followed below. We're so proud of Adrian for continuing family tradition. Family tradition. I'd cooked that exact meal, dish by dish, for the past 7 Thanksgivings. No mention of me, no tag, no thanks, no trace. My fingers hovered over the reply button. A reply that would have been short, precise. Cutting, but calm. Instead, I closed the laptop, not out of cowardice, out of clarity. Back in the bedroom, I sat in the dark. The ceiling fan hummed like background static to a life I wasn't living. The laughter downstairs filtered through the vents, Adrian's laugh, sharp and eager. A reminder that the show was still running. And I was just a crew member who'd wandered off set. Carter's text from last week flashed in my head. Stop folding napkins for people who wouldn't notice if you weren't at the table. I repeated it, out loud this time, not as a joke, not even as a thought, as a fact. Then I whispered something else, just 3 words. What if I... The sentence didn't finish itself, didn't have to, because the possibility of vanishing, of choosing to be absent, was finally real. And for the first time in my life, it didn't scare me. It excited me. I woke early, the kind of early where the house still held its breath. Before anyone moved, before anyone laughed or complained or clinked dishes loud enough to remind me where I was. There was a small stack of albums on the side table in the living room, leather-bound, with gold lettering. Mom's tradition. Every year, she printed a fresh Thanksgiving album, photos from last year's gathering, curated like we were a family that remembered everyone. I opened the top one, page after page of smiling faces. Adrian, of course, front and center in almost every shot. Becca's kids in matching sweaters. My mother beside the turkey, holding a carving knife like a queen with her scepter. Olivia, already in the family shots like she'd been born into the bloodline. Then I found myself. Not my face, just the back of my head in one photo, reaching for a bowl, my hand, mid-wipe, in another, clearing a dish off the table. No captions mentioned me. I was in the room, in the house, probably sweating over the stove, but not in the memory. I remembered thinking something dumb last year while folding napkins, something like, "At least this will be captured. At least I'll be part of it this time." They remembered the cranberry sauce, but forgot who made it. I closed the album carefully. Too carefully, maybe. Like if I let it snap shut, it would hurt louder. The sun was barely up. I didn't feel tired anymore, just hollow. I placed the album back exactly where I found it, spine aligned, as if nothing had happened. By afternoon, the house was buzzing again. Adrian gathered everyone in the living room. "Annual recap time," he said, like a showman introducing his own highlight reel. He connected his phone to the TV. A slick video started playing, stock music, color grading, flashy transitions, his speaking gig clips, Olivia's Vineyard weekend, the kids' Halloween costumes. Laughter bubbled up around me, nods of approval. My mother wiped away tears when Adrian's speech at some fundraising gala played. "He's such a leader," she whispered. There were moments I recognized. I had been there, physically, but the scenes were trimmed, sped up, cropped. Like the editor, Adrian, obviously, had shaved me off the frame like an unwanted crust. Adrian chuckled. "Had to trim it for time, bro. Nothing personal." I smiled, just the corners of my mouth. Inside, though, I felt something settle, quiet and final. You can't trim someone who was never centered in the first place. It wasn't the edit, it was the history. I thought back, years of albums, recaps, retrospectives, always the background, always the helper. It wasn't hate. It was something worse, disinterest dressed as civility. Function, not family. A quote Carter once told me came up from memory. "If you're always behind the camera, don't be surprised when you're not in the film." I was disappearing in plain sight. Not gone. Just never placed. And that hits harder than being pushed out, because you wonder if you were ever really in. I didn't get angry. Anger takes energy. This was different. This was grief. By the time the house quieted again, the sky had already darkened. I took a blanket from the couch, stepped outside, and sat near the edge of the cliff behind the house. The ocean looked the same as last year. Same as when I was 10. Waves slapping rocks. A rhythm that didn't care if I showed up or not. I pulled the blanket tighter, but not because of the cold. I didn't cry. I didn't even sigh. I just sat, and I felt the void of it. The weight of a life spent serving plates, wiping counters, remembering birthdays. Only to realize no one was remembering me. I pulled out my phone and scrolled back to a photo from years ago, me and Grandma on the back porch. I was 8. She was laughing, holding my hand, not the camera. She saw me. Always did. Then I pulled up today's group shot. Everyone smiling, a perfect scene. One of those shots that would make it into next year's album. I was in it, barely. Off to the left. Elbow cut off. I deleted it, then opened my notes app. If no one else was going to write me into the story, maybe I had to start doing it myself. I typed the first sentence. Nothing profound. Just honest. I didn't vanish. I was erased. I didn't join them for breakfast. Just couldn't. Not after the video, not after the album. I poured myself weak coffee in the quiet kitchen and left it half full. No one noticed. Later that morning, I walked past the den, heading toward the mudroom when I heard Eleanor's voice. "We should move it before the holiday crowd shows up. Adrian, make sure you have someone help you pack it tight. It's delicate." Adrian muttered something back, probably a joke I didn't catch, but the sound of their footsteps told me exactly what they were circling. The cabinet. My grandmother's cabinet? I stopped just out of view, still behind the wall, still pretending I was welcome in my own story. "It'll look better in a modern space," Eleanor said. "Merwin doesn't have room in that small apartment of his anyway." That was it. No discussion. No question. No would he want it? Just repurposed like I didn't matter. Again, I used to polish that thing every holiday. Grandma would hand me a soft cloth, and I'd wipe every spindle while she told me stories about where it came from, how it was one of the only things she brought when she moved out of her parents' house. "This will be yours someday," she said, more than once. I stood there for a moment longer, then walked upstairs without saying a word. My hands were cold. My thoughts weren't angry. Not yet, just very still. Around noon, I opened the cabinet out of instinct. It was empty now, except for a small envelope tucked in the back corner of the bottom drawer. I pulled it out. My name was on it, just my name. I unfolded it slowly, careful not to rip the edges. Her handwriting was shakier than I remembered, but still hers. You were the heart of this house, even when they looked the other way. I sat with that sentence for a while. Then I folded it back, slid it into a new envelope, and sealed it tight. On the front, I wrote, "Do not open unless you forget who I was." I didn't know who needed that reminder more, me or them. By the time the light changed through the windows, Eleanor was back in the kitchen, setting out glassware like she was directing a stage show. She called for me by tone, not name. "Honey, I was thinking maybe you could still help set the table before guests arrive." I didn't turn from the hallway. "I'm not cooking this year, Mom. I thought I made that clear." She didn't flinch. "Of course you're tired, but just a little setup, that's not too much, is it?" I paused, then stepped forward slowly, stopping just outside the kitchen door. "I'd rather not." She smiled, too easy, too bright, like she'd rehearsed this. Then she dropped her voice just low enough to land where it hurts. "Don't ruin this for everyone." It wasn't a scream. It wasn't cruel in tone, but it cracked something that had been holding the tension up like stilts. And it wasn't the first time I'd heard that line. On the back porch, I stared out at the pine trees that separated the yard from the cliffside. I'd stood there so many times before, after holidays, after quiet breakdowns, after everyone else had gone home and I was still washing pans. I started seeing the pattern, not just the words, but the contract, the one I never signed but kept obeying. Be helpful, and you get included. Stay quiet, and you get peace. Say no. And suddenly, you're the problem. Did Adrian ever hear, "Don't ruin this for everyone"? Probably not. He was the celebration. I was the cleanup. I flashed back to a moment, 15 years old, standing outside the laundry room, hearing Eleanor gush to someone on the phone about Adrian's soccer game. "Merwin. Oh, he's the quiet type. We don't need to fuss over him. The quiet type." That label stuck to my skin like dust you can't wash off. But clarity has a way of drying the sadness up before it ever becomes a sob. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I pulled the note from my grandmother back out. "You were the heart of this house, even when they looked the other way." I read it again, then again. And finally, I didn't cry. I folded it carefully, tucked it back in the envelope, and added a second seal with clear tape. I texted Carter. "Thinking of leaving early." A minute passed. Then, "Thinking of staying late in your own story." I didn't reply, just looked out the window at the moonlight hitting the driveway. I hadn't packed yet, but something in me was already gone. It was the first time I walked into the dining room and didn't bring anything, not even myself. The cinnamon hit me first, that sweet, artificial smell that screams holiday but never feels warm. I was halfway down the stairs when I heard Eleanor already directing voices in the kitchen. She spotted me like a general spotting her foot soldier. "Oh good, you're up. Could you come set the table before guests arrive? Adrian's running a bit behind." I stopped at the last step. "Mom, I'm not on setup this year, remember?" She didn't miss a beat. "I know, sweetheart, but this isn't cooking, it's just arranging things. It's your touch that makes it feel like home." She handed me the stack of napkins before I could respond. Monogrammed, stiff, folded with the weight of habit. The same ones from last year. And the year before. I didn't argue. But I wasn't folding anymore. I was documenting. That afternoon, just as the sun dipped low enough to catch the dining room glass, one of Becca's kids came bouncing in, tablet in hand. "You're in a magazine!" she shouted, waving the screen in the air. I walked over slowly. A lifestyle piece, local publication, titled "Cape Families Who Keep the Holidays Alive." There was the photo. Front and center, Eleanor, Adrian, and Becca at a picture-perfect Thanksgiving table. Candlelight, polished silver, warm tones, the works. I remembered that dinner. I'd been there. Hell, I'd cooked half the meal. But in the photo, I was nowhere. Cropped out, forgotten, or never framed in the first place. Beneath the picture, a quote from Eleanor. Adrian is the heart of our traditions. He brings us together. The room hummed with praise. No one noticed I hadn't smiled or spoken. I didn't feel mad. That was the part that scared me. I felt nothing. Just a soft, flat line inside me. There is no place at this table for the invisible, I murmured. But only Lydia glanced over. She didn't say anything, just looked. Later, as the kitchen settled into its usual pre-dinner buzz, I stayed at the edge. Eleanor moved about like she always did, directing, fixing, correcting. Adrian held court in the living room, wineglass in hand, retelling a deal story to Uncle Drew. Becca typed on her phone like the whole evening was beneath her. And I stood in the corner, watching a play I'd already seen. Just this time, I wasn't cast. Lydia came in through the front, holding a bouquet of 2 bright flowers. She walked straight over, gave me a quick side hug. "Still standing?" she asked under her breath. "Barely," I muttered. She smiled, brief and understanding. I didn't try to make a moment out of it. I just kept watching Eleanor give Adrian credit for the wine I bought. Watching Becca fumble a serving tray that I caught before it hit the floor. Watching myself disappear, one step at a time. Before bed, I passed through the living room and saw Mom's iPad on the armrest of the couch. Still open to the magazine article. The screen hadn't even gone to sleep. I picked it up, read the quote again. Adrian is the heart of our traditions. I stared at the words for what felt like 10 full breaths. Then I clicked share, hovered over the contact list, and stopped. Closed the screen, drafted a text to Carter instead. "I think I'm done." It didn't take long. "Then set your own table. Let them notice the empty chair." I nodded to myself, walked into the dining room, still set from earlier. Everything perfectly aligned. Candles unlit, chairs all pulled back just enough to slide in smoothly. I walked to my usual seat, picked up the silver napkin ring placed in front of it, slid it into my jacket pocket, not to steal it, but to remember that I was here. You don't owe loyalty to a script that erases you, and tomorrow, if the table was still full, it would be full without me. The house was quiet, but it wasn't still. It was the kind of quiet that waits, like something coiled and breathless. Thanksgiving morning. Eleanor was already in the dining room, fussing over details that no one but her would ever notice. Knife angles, charger plate alignment, napkin folds that felt more ceremonial than functional. I hovered just outside the archway, watching. Every place setting had a name card, elegant cursive, gold trim. Every seat but mine. I stepped closer, slowly. "Mom?" I asked, not accusing, just tired. "Where's mine?" She glanced up, unbothered. "Oh, well, you're always back and forth anyway. It didn't make sense to place you." I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. The air tightened around my chest in that way it does when you're not shocked anymore, just finished. I turned, walked out the front door, and kept walking past the cars, down the driveway, and through the backyard trail toward the beach. No one followed. The wind was biting near the water, but I welcomed it. It gave me something to feel. I pulled out my phone and dialed Carter. He picked up on the second ring. I didn't even say hello, just started talking. They didn't give me a seat. They gave me a tray. He let me finish. Then, silence. Followed by, "You're not invisible, Merwin. You're just surrounded by people who like you that way." It hit harder than it should have because it was too true to argue with. He didn't stop. "And if you keep showing up, they'll keep handing you trays." I didn't cry, not even close, but something inside me sank, quiet and deep. I looked out at the cold waves, let his words sink in until they stopped echoing. We hung up. No goodbye. I didn't need one. I had clarity. I walked back up just before noon. The living room buzzed with shallow noise. Adrian had taken over the cocktail station. Rowan, his daughter, stood beside him, handing out garnishes like a junior hostess. She turned to me, bright-eyed and oblivious. "Daddy says you cook because you don't have a family to take care of like him." It landed with a thud. Innocent, honest, brutal. The room chuckled around her. Eleanor let out a soft, amused sigh. Adrian didn't correct her. I didn't react, not right away. I just nodded, placed the empty glass I was holding on the nearest table, and walked upstairs. Steady, silent. In the guest bathroom, I locked the door, leaned on the sink, stared into the mirror. I wasn't angry. I wasn't crying. But my reflection looked like a ghost trying to remember what it used to be. Not even children see me as a whole person. That thought stung more than anything they'd said all week. By evening, the sun dipped, casting long shadows through the windows. The dining room sat like a shrine, untouched, glowing under the chandelier Eleanor insisted be cleaned every year by me. I walked to the closet in the hallway, opened the inside pocket of my coat, and pulled out the sealed envelope from Grandma. Still there. Still untouched. I didn't need to open it. I remembered every word. I slipped it back into the pocket, but this time, with intention, not to protect it, to carry it. This wasn't about the seat anymore. It was about what I wouldn't carry into tomorrow. I went into my room, pulled out my laptop, and started searching flights. Nothing traditional, nothing public. I didn't want to be tracked, asked, or begged. I booked a private one-way helicopter. Departure, 3:15 p.m. tomorrow. Not because I was running away, but because I'd decided where I would land. The dinner started without me, just as I knew it would. From the inn's window, I could almost time it, how long before the food went cold, the wine settled too heavily in their glasses, and the smiles began to thin out. Traditions only run deep if the person keeping them alive shows up. This year, I didn't. I imagined the room, the chairs all filled, except for mine, the one closest to the kitchen door, the one easiest to get in and out of without interrupting the real conversation. And then it came. A photo, sent to the family group chat, probably by mistake. I saw their faces. Eleanor's too tight smile, Adrian's raised glass, Olivia's overperformed laugh, Becca's distracted eyes, and the table. Full, polished, but not warm. I stared at the screen, then slowly opened the group chat. It was no longer titled Thanksgiving Crew. It had a new name, Adrian Crew. I didn't react, didn't laugh, didn't rage. I just hit Leave Group. That was it. No warning. No note, just a quiet, permanent click. Not a tantrum, a funeral. Not for them, for the part of me that stayed in that chat too long, hoping, serving, folding my edges in to fit inside a frame they'd already cropped me out of. I placed my phone down and stared at the ceiling for a while. It didn't feel like rebellion. It felt like truth. Later that night, I sat on the edge of the guest bed at the inn, writing in my notes app. Not for anyone else, not to post or send, just for me. You didn't lose me, you just never invited the version of me that didn't serve. I read it once, then again, and saved it without editing. How long had I played the part out of guilt? Not love, not loyalty, just some twisted sense of usefulness I inherited and never questioned. They didn't hate me. They just never made space for me. And maybe that was worse. I remembered Carter's text from a few days back. If you keep showing up, they'll keep handing you trays. I smiled. Just slightly, not with bitterness, with freedom. Thanksgiving morning felt like a breaking. That evening felt like a burial. By morning, there was only silence. No texts, no missed calls, no guilt. I opened Instagram out of habit. Adrian had posted a photo, the same dinner table, same people, different caption. Thankful for those who show up. It was so perfectly calculated it almost made me laugh, but I didn't. Then I saw Lydia's comment underneath. Some absences are louder than applause. I didn't like it right away. I waited a few minutes, then quietly tapped the heart. Didn't reply. Didn't need to. I walked to the dresser, opened the drawer where I'd placed the silver napkin ring from the night before, and held it for a second. It wasn't heavy, just familiar. I placed it gently on the wood surface, not this year. The clinking of silverware echoed more than usual. There was a lull after every fake laugh, every forced comment. The table looked full, but the air felt half empty. They started dinner without me. That was the plan. The chair I usually sat in, the one near the end, easy to get up from, easy to clear plates from, was missing. In its place, a serving tray, napkins, water pitchers. Becca tilted her head mid-sip. Is Merwin not coming? Eleanor didn't look up. He's making his choice. Everyone nodded like that line meant something deep. Adrian reached for the carving knife. The stuffing was bland, the turkey dry. The room was eating, but no one was tasting. Then it started. A low, distant thrum. Rhythmic. Not a car. Not wind. Adrian looked up first, squinting. Is that? Olivia walked toward the window, squinting. You've got to be kidding me. The sound grew closer, louder. The silverware on the table rattled. Everyone moved toward the windows like moths drawn to static. Outside, the helicopter descended onto the lawn, slow, deliberate, unapologetic. I stepped out, dressed in nothing formal, just clean lines, dark coat, unbothered hair. I wasn't here to attend. I was here to interrupt. The blades slowed but didn't stop. I walked calmly across the grass. My boots crunched against the dead leaves. Inside, they watched through the glass like I was an apparition. I opened the back door without knocking, walked past Olivia, past Eleanor, past Becca's gasp. I reached the table and looked at the seat where my name had never been. I pulled a linen napkin from my coat, folded, not into the usual maple leaf, but a snowflake. I laid it in the center of the table, right where the tray had been. I used to fold leaves, I said, clear but quiet, to match the season. Then I looked up. This year, I picked my own. No one moved. Adrian raised an eyebrow. Is this about the chair? I didn't blink. No, this is about never having a name card at all. Eleanor started to speak. I raised my hand, gently but firmly. This isn't a fight, I told her. It's a boundary. Adrian scoffed. You could have just said something. You didn't need the whole parade. I turned to him slowly. Said something. You mean like the last time I was asked to set the table? Or when my meals became your menus? He looked away. I reached into my coat pocket and took out the sealed envelope, placed it beside the snowflake napkin. This is for whoever forgot what I meant to this house. Eleanor opened her mouth again, but I was already walking away. Out the front door. The sound of the helicopter picked up. Stronger now. Nobody followed. Not even Lydia. But before I reached the steps, I paused, turned back to face them all still frozen behind the glass. Next year, I said, if you want me at your table, it'll be as a guest. Not the help. I stepped into the helicopter, didn't wave, didn't look back, lifted off without apology, left the table, left the roll, left the old version of me at that doorstep, like a tray nobody offered to carry. Back in Boston, silence met me at the door, not cold, not bitter, just there, no one asking where I'd been, no one directing, no one calling my name while holding a dish I didn't eat. That kind of silence had weight, but this time, it settled like a blanket. I unpacked slower than usual, not dragging, just present. Every shirt I folded reminded me I had a choice in being here, that I returned not to retreat, but to reclaim. The copper pans were still in the box, unopened. I didn't move them, just let them stay buried behind the vacuum and the holiday lights I hadn't strung in years. I sat at the kitchen table later that night and opened my journal, wrote one sentence. Silence isn't empty. Sometimes it's where I live best. A week passed, without much notice. The first snowfall dusted the windows. The world felt stiller. Then came the text. Christmas is at our place again. Could you come early to help prep? Adrian has meetings. No, hello. No, how are you? Just the usual muscle memory of entitlement, typed out like a recipe they assumed I still followed. I didn't reply. I forwarded the message to Carter. Just a thumbs up emoji. He sent back a gif of someone torching a recipe card. I smiled. That same afternoon, Olivia left a voicemail. The tone was sweet, scripted. We missed you. Hope you're doing okay. Call if you want. I didn't. Because I knew what that kind of "we missed you" meant. It meant, we missed how useful you were. Not who I was. I deleted the message without playing it twice. The next day, Lydia came by for tea. She brought no gifts, no commentary, just spiced cider and a quiet warmth I hadn't realized I missed. We sat on the floor of my small apartment, backs against the couch, legs stretched out. After a while, she reached into her coat and pulled something out. The silver napkin ring. The one I'd pocketed before leaving the house. The one I'd left on the dresser at the inn. She placed it in my hand, didn't say a word, then gently, "They know. They just don't know how to admit it." I traced the edges of the ring with my thumb. "I'm not waiting for them to," I said. Lydia nodded. "Next year, we host our own. No scripts." Something unspoken passed between us then. Not closure, not healing, but a kind of knowing. Peace doesn't always show up loud. Sometimes it just sits beside you on the carpet and doesn't need to be explained. Christmas Eve morning. My phone rang. Eleanor. I let it ring once, twice, then picked up. She asked how I was, how the weather was in Boston. Small talk meant to stretch the silence. Then she got to it. "We'd still like you here. You don't have to cook. Just be with us." I breathed in slowly. "You say that," I replied, "but the table still has my place set in the kitchen." Silence. Then quietly, "Maybe next year we'll set it where it belongs." I didn't smile, but I didn't flinch either. "I hope you do," I said. Then I ended the call, not with bitterness, not with a door slam, just with enough. Outside, snow had started to fall again, soft and slow. I stood at the window, watching it cover the streets, the rooftops, the things we don't always think to protect. Some chapters don't need closure, just a quiet door closing, and a peaceful one opening.